This is Puppets by Arlee. I'm Arlee, and this is how you make puppet pants. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe. Every time you subscribe, another puppet gets a pair of pants. To get started, I have a big piece of construction paper here to draw my pattern on. And the first thing we're going to do is figure out the curve around the crotch of the puppet. So I have a pipe cleaner here. It's super fuzzy, but any type of pipe cleaner or wire or something that'll hold its shape of a curve for just a second will work. And we're going to bend the pipe cleaner around where the crotch seam of the pants will be. And hold that in place. And then so that is the shape of our crotch seam. Then we're going to take and trace that seam. So that's the crotch seam. And we're going to make these pants not like real human pants. We're going to make these pants symmetrical front and back. So next, measure from the inseam, so that's the bottom of the crotch seam, to where the bottom of the pants should be. And it looks like these need to be 8 inches long. So our center line is going to be 8 inches down from the crotch seam. Draw a center line. And then this is the bottom edge of the pants. And then up here at the top, looks like it's about 7 inches, and so that needs to be parallel to the bottom of the pants. So this is the waist, and this is the bottom hem. Next, we need to figure out how wide across our pants should be. So take a tape measure and make your tape measure around your foot in how you imagine, as thin or as wide as you wish the pants to be. And it looks like 7 inches for my puppet. So on the bottom, half of 7 inches is 3.5. So make it on 2 lines of your center line. And then the waist needs to be measured. So measure from the front of the crotch actually you can just measure all the way around. That makes more sense. And my waist all the way around is about I'm going to say 10.5 inches. So half of 10.5 inches is, of course, 5 1/4 inch. And actually, it was a little tight, so I'm going to go 5 1/2 inch on both sides. So that's my waist, and now we can draw the line. These are the side seams of the leg. And then for the hem above the waist, I like to add a full inch for extra space to glue it onto the body. And down here at the bottom, I also like to add a full inch for the hem, underside of the cuff. Now this is quite a tapered leg, so I'll change the shape a bit. Oh, and then add I like to sew with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So I have this special ruler that can mark out a seam allowance of 5/8 inch. Run over here. And then put on the inside of the crotch. And we'll fold this in half. Okay, there is our pants pattern. Now this is the side seam on the side of on the outside or on the inside of the leg, and I want to make an extra seam allowance along that. So because pants are generally 4 pieces of fabric together. So along here, I'm going to add an extra 5/8 inch seam allowance. And I don't know if that's enough for me to like cut out a whole new pattern for that. I'm just gonna cut that out of the fabric. So here's my fabric. It's this cute little brown and white tweed. When you're costuming for marionettes, remember that you can't use big print. You need to use print that is to scale of marionette. Like if you use a big huge floral print and it's too large for the puppet, we're trying to sell the fact that these puppets are miniaturized. So search for fabric that has small prints to the scale of the puppet. Okay. So I got my fabric here. Okay, I'm going to cut out one leg, and the edges of this are pretty straight, so I'm going to use this as my extra 5/8 inch seam. Now, if you're working with plaids, you will have to match up the plaid pattern. But this is pretty speckled. I'm not going to worry about matching up the pattern. So that's the edge. We have 4 layers of this fabric. And so these seams at 5/8 inch. You can of course use pins to hold it together, but my fabric seems to be laying pretty well together, so I'm just going to go for it. Next, we're going to press this seam, so I'll start heating up my iron. Now this is the outside seam of the pant leg. But then when one of the difficulties of costuming marionettes is sometimes you can, if you want to take off a foot or a leg to put the costume on, you can do that if you want to undo the wire. If not, you have to open up seams so that you can put the costume onto the marionette. This is called a seam roll. It makes it so that the iron is only touching the stitched part of the seam, and it helps prevent press marks. If you don't have a seam roll, you can just take a magazine and wrap it in a towel. A rolled up magazine, that is. Be sure your iron is on a steam setting because fabric will change its shape with steam, depending on the type of fabric. If it's a plastic based fabric, heat is what changes it. But if it's a natural fibers based fabric, like wool or silk or cotton, now I happen to know that this fabric doesn't leave press marks, but always do a press test on a scrap piece of fabric. That's one side. Pressing always makes or breaks a sewing project. You spend just as much time pressing most of the time as you do sewing. So don't underestimate the importance of pressing. First, press one inch up for the hem. Now, marionettes are so small that I usually just press the hem at the bottom of pants. I don't actually stitch it. So remember, it was a 1 inch fold or a 1 inch hem at the bottom. So pin that in place. Now we sew the inseam. But this will be basted because this is a seam we're going to baste and then press into place. And then we'll have to take most of it out as we put the big feet of the puppet through the pants. But it will be pressed so that we'll hand stitch it back into place. And we're doing the inseam because that should be seen less. And sew this at 5/8 inch seam allowance, or whatever seam allowance that you planned for. So now we press this. I don't know if these pants are big enough to fit my seam roll in. They are not quite. That's okay. I have another tool. This is a point presser. It's mostly for pressing tiny points on tailoring, like the edges of collars. But it also works for pressing tiny seams on Marionette clothes. Do both the wrong side and the right side. Flip that sucker. Now, the trick to sewing pants is have one leg right side out, one leg inside out. Put the right side out one inside the inside out one. And since these are four-way symmetrical, a four-way symmetrical pattern, doesn't matter front and back. Then line up the crotch. So you got a crotch seam, four-way crotch seam, pin that. So we're going to 5/8 inch seam allowance, stitch regular on one side, tie a knot, then switch to basting kind of around the butt and stitch back, because we're going to pull this apart to put the pants on and sew it back. So all right, I'm at the crotch, tie a knot. Now I'll switch to basting stitch length. Do a little pressing on these torso seams. All right, now we put the pants on. First, start by turning them right side out. And you never know, try it first, see if you can put on your pants without removing any seams. Yeah. So, start by taking a seam ripper and remove the side that you basted. I guess if these were real pants, this would be like the fly, but I'm going to put it in the back so that the straight machine stitching is towards the front. And try for one leg. Oh, might I get lucky? be able to pull it through. Oh, my fabric is stretchy enough. Well, if you can't get the foot through, you can start pulling out some of this inseam. But it looks like I was able to get it through. So there you go. Sometimes you get lucky. And put the other leg through. Now we should have quite a bit of extra fabric above because remember, we designed it so that the waist would have an inch of fabric. Now keep in mind this eyelet will, you'll sew over it, but when you string through it, you'll string through the pants. And sew up the back fly. I recommend doing a hidden running stitch, so a slip stitch. And as always, good practice for hand stitching is do a knot every inch. For my hand sewing, I like to use a double thread, and then I like to do 2 buttonhole stitch knots, meaning you make a loop and you pull through, and then in the end separate the 2 threads and do like a few granny knots, just to be sure that this stitching doesn't pull out. Okay, now with these pants, we can glue them to the body, we can stitch them to the body, we can, there's several ways we can attach it. So get it so they're hanging right. And I like to do a big stitch through the internal stomach fabric. And then I figure that it has, and then of course the butt string will go through the pants also. So I've put some pins through the stomach fabric that is glued to the wooden pieces of the puppet. So I have 4 points. And I've got some super tough thread here. And I'll just make four big stitches with this super tough thread. Get a curved needle. And just tie it on with several granny knots. There we got it. We got some pants. And there you have it. Puppet pants. Almost ready for the stage. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe. Every time you subscribe, another puppet gets a pair of pants. If you like my videos, please like and subscribe.